Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Torchwood episode Countrycide, written by Chris Chibnall and directed by Andy Goddard in his first directed story for the series. This takes the Torchwood team away from the city of Cardiff and into a small countryside in the title. This means that the story has a completely different visual style compared to the rest of the series, as it, forestries and fields and a small little village, all of that good stuff. And the majority of this plot mainly sees our main characters. It's one of the few stories in which all of our main characters have some sort of prominent role. This story also develops the relationship between Gwen and Owen, in a way which I won't talk about now because it's spoilers. Also, this story is most notable for its depiction of its villains, which again I can't spoil for the moment because of what they actually are. But that's one of the big mysteries of the story, is what these villains and what can they do and everything. This story was one of a few stories that people actually liked from Torchwood Series 1. It's one of the few stories in which a lot of people praise it. There's a lot of great, a lot of critics, enjoying it. The mainstream seem to enjoy this one. It's one of the more graphic episodes of Torchwood. It is easily the bloodiest episode so far, with its subject matter. And I think I've actually talked about all I want. That took really... That was a lot quicker than I thought it was going to be. Andy Goddard would obviously become a prominent director for Series 1 and 2 of Torchwood before directing in a Doctor Who special, The Next Doctor. Yeah, this is where he started off, and he ends with The Next Doctor. It's a very bizarre turn of events, especially how those stories couldn't be any more different. So yeah, that's a strange chance. It's also a lot of people's favourite Chris Chibnall story. So there's something, I suppose. And it's easily my favourite story of his in Torchwood. But mind you, as I'm recording this video, I haven't seen any of his stories from Series 2. So I don't know how good Absent Friends is or other stories in Series 2. So there's that to consider. So as always, that story is actually the start of the CD that it was released in. So I have the official Series 1 box set here, which is given to me by my friend Gwen. Thank you, Gwen. But like always, I've printed out my own official DVD cover. And this one I've actually put together by myself. I couldn't find anybody who had done a cover for this before, or at least I didn't find one I liked, so I kind of put it together. It's a bit dark. You can see the tortured crew and a civilian in the story there. Very nice. Here's the spine if anyone is interested. Very nice. And here's the back. Which also says it includes the episode Greeks Bearing Gifts, which is the next story in the series. So there's a lot of things to get on with this story. It's easily one of the most popular Torchwood stories, and popular in a good way, because most Torchwood episodes around this time were popular in that hilariously ironic sense, but this is one of the few occasions in which people genuinely seem to enjoy it. It takes many influences from horror movies, specifically the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it feels like Torchwood doing a cabin fever horror film. So let's get into the story at hand, shall we? So the pre-credit sequence is just your typical girl. She's in her car. She's on the road, and suddenly she finds a body on the floor. She goes to investigate, only to find that it was a dummy, as somebody has bursted her tyres as a creature. We don't get a good look at it, but it appears to be some sort of creature, because we know the world of Torchwood. Gets her in a car and presumably murders her or kidnaps her for their own sakes, as we lead into the credit sequence. It's a bit cliched, a bit stocked, but it works. It helps bring up the atmosphere of this horror tension and the nighty, gloomy atmosphere of the fields in the dark. Give it a very strong visual appeal, something which Andy Goddard takes a huge advantage of in the story, the location shooting. So the Torchwood team have arrived here after they have been basically asked to investigate the disappearances in this area. Usually they only concern themselves with Cardiff because of the rift in space and time that lives underneath Cardiff, thanks to the events of the Unquiet Dead. If you want to know about that, you can watch my vlog episode on the Unquiet Dead, which is in series 1 of New Who, with Christopher Eccleston. If you want to check that out, it's thing. But as Captain Jack describes, they don't know how big the rift is. It could even be extending, and so it's bringing out alien creatures like weevils and stuff into the countryside, where all of these deaths and murders are seemingly taking place. They've noticed there are a bunch of missing people cases within, I think they said 5 weeks of each other in this area, and so they've gone to investigate. And so they set up camp, and right off the bat we get reintroduced to some ideas in Torchwood, specifically the episode Cyberwoman, which was the last previous story written by Chris Chibnall, which makes a little bit of sense. It also ties in with some of the themes. Toshika trying to start up a conversation and wants to, talks to the crew about their last kiss, clearly trying to indicate something, as there seems to be some sort of hint here that she has an interest. And she says that her last kiss was actually Owen during New Year's, and she had the mistletoe, and as Owen counted, that was a few years ago, and she hasn't kissed anyone yet, presumably hinting at a relationship between them, which, from what I can gather, is something that gets paid off in Series 2. Gwen obviously makes a reference to Reese, but Owen gives the big bombshell that his last kiss was actually Gwen during Cyberwoman, which kind of puts a stud in a relationship between Gwen and Toshika. Nothing of that really is present here. It just seems to be like, right, we're setting this up so that we can deal with this in later episodes. And Yanto mentions that his last kiss was actually his girlfriend, who became the Cyberwoman in that adventure, as the games all stop and they take it seriously. Like, sorry, Yanto, we didn't realise. And Yanto's like, yeah, you never realise, you just completely forget I'm here, aren't you? Now, this scene works well because, or at least like in the context of itself, because we're finally facing these character moments. We've got Toshika not confessing, but revealing to the audience anyway that she might have an interest in Owen. Owen and Gwen started picking up this relationship, which actually does play out through the story, and Yanto is still grieving over the death of his girlfriend. The issue here in this story is that only one of those storylines, the storyline between Owen and Gwen, actually gets picked up in this adventure, and the rest of it feels like we're just going to bring it up to remind you all that these are things that need to be brought up in later episodes, teasing us for later adventures, which isn't an issue when you first watch this story, because you could just play it off as just like a scene that the characters are talking. But when you rewatch it, it's like, it seems like pointless teasing in this story for stuff that doesn't actually revolve anything in this story. That's not how you do a story arc, Chris Chibnall. So yeah, it's nice to know that, you know, there's some consistency with his writing, that he's not very good at story arcs. The teaser there for his era of the show, on Doctor Who anyway. Chris Chibnall, for those of you who don't know, was actually the showrunner for series 1 and 2 of Torchwood, when Russell T Davies had to commit between either this or Sarah Jane Adventures, and he obviously chose the Sarah Jane Adventures. Still working prominently behind the scenes on Torchwood, but mainly Chris Chibnall was the showrunner here. And so the Torchwood team split out to try and find, trying to find out, you know, where these people are, setting up camp. And we get a scene then of Gwen and Owen basically arguing over the fact that Owen had to bring up the fact that they had a snog. And things start to get intense as Gwen holds Owen to a tree, and the things then turn around. So when he's in the power of the situation, and is basically taunting her, saying that like Reese isn't that good in bed, and it's like, when's the last time you've had sex until from the beginning of the night to the morning? You haven't had that. You know, there's a subtle way of doing it. You know what I'm on about? When's the last time you had some really good? And Gwen seems to be actually taken by this. You can see it in her face that she is kind of magmatized by him. Now, that is a criticism with the series, is that the Owen-Gwen relationship seems very stock and very poorly handled. Obviously, she has the boyfriend Reese, but you know, she can't talk to Reese about all of his tortured stuff, and so she tries to connect to the one person who even offers, you know, to be with her intimately, and that would be Owen, and it starts up this affair that they have with each other. And it's one of the things that this story is criticised for, which I completely understand. I don't know if I actually have a strong opinion on it, if I have to say. I feel like the story does do a good job at trying to reason with Gwen's point of view, especially at the end of the story when she gives a speech about how she's witnessed all of these horrible things, these messed up things, and she can't go home and talk to Reese about it. She seems a bit disconnected from the real world now, and so Owen, who is part of this world, they have something to connect, this messed up world. But on the other hand, yeah, it doesn't feel like Gwen, who is supposed to be the emotional beat of the story, of the characters, would take to someone as pervy, shall we say, as Owen. And it does kind of feel like Gwen is falling for Owen because Gwen is a woman and Owen is this guy that's promising her like the best sex ever, showing that, like, you know, I am the dominant one, Reese is the weak one, ah ha ha, and Gwen's like, oh, I hate you, but yes, it's true, you are the dominant one, so let's sleep together, kind of mindset. And that is an issue. I just realised I've talked about way too much about the start of this story. We don't have a lot of time with these. But yeah, that's just an element of this story. It doesn't really play. It gets mentioned a lot in this story, and it does seem to be building up their relationship. They do spend a lot of time in the story, but it never gets resolved. It never gets the story pushes the idea of them having an affair to the point where they do generally just have an affair at the end of the story. Strengthens, and that does play a part in the story, but in terms of the narrative and the ideas of the story, it doesn't really have anything to do with anything. The story then takes a massive turn where Gwen originally thinks that someone is following them, and when they try to investigate, they discover a absolutely bloody corpse which is ripped out of all skin and any organs, leaving basically a red, bloody husk of an individual, which is clearly shown to have not have been dead there. There's no signs of any struggle around. Somebody has been dragging this body and put it in the middle of the forestry. And it turns out this is actually a distraction, as somebody has then taken the Torchwood mobile, shall I say, the Torchwood van, and drives off with them and parks it 50 miles down the road as they go to investigate this small village which is parked nearby. And when they go to investigate, they go and find more bloody bodies in these abandoned houses, these abandoned BRBs. Now, this is what this story does. There's not a lot of a narrative thread here. There's nothing really like lots of plot elements and stuff. Our characters find themselves in a situation and we are bearing witness to the situation of them finding more bloody corpses, trying to discover the mystery of what's happening. But the majority, we just follow our characters as one by one they get picked off and learn a little bit of information, leaving that the majority of the story, the majority of its interest is from its directing, from thing. It's nice to know that Chris Chibnall can write stories where dialogue isn't a prominent feature of the story. There's a lot of scenes in which characters are not talking, they're just like looking around as they bear witness and all looking at the scenery as the fear, the tension, the atmosphere around them takes the hold. And with this kind of concept, this kind of idea, because the majority of the story is just that, just characters really wandering about. You need a strong director, a director that knows what he's doing behind the camera and is using his time well to build up some suspense and atmosphere. Luckily, Andy Goddard is a perfect choice for this story, giving us some really great moments of tension. Sadly, I don't think in terms of sticking with a narrative, he does kind of struggle, but in terms of the atmosphere, a great example is when Jack asks Toshika and Yanto to investigate. They go to a little house up the fields where presumably they will try and find the van, and they look around the house, and Yanto goes up to the field whilst he's talking to Toshika, only to Toshika to not answer, turns around and finds that Toshiko has gone and disappeared. Now this is what I mean by he's great at the directing and the style of it, but does have some misses in terms of setting up the story. When Yanto turns around and notices that Toshika has disappeared, we get a lot of long camera shots of Yanto around by himself, and you can just see like the house in the background, but we never get a shot of his point of view seeing where Toshika's gone. Like, from the way it's directed, she could have just easily been hidden behind the corner, and that does kind of weaken the atmosphere, but there's a lot of great moments of Yanto looking around, trying to work out what's going on with this really dark, gloomy setting, this environment for him. And there's some odd, but actually ones that work, jump cuts of Yanto just constantly looking around. And yes, this story is slow, and it's taken a lot of influences from horror films, specifically the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it does do a very good job. Gwen, Jack and Owen go looking at some of these houses that they have found, originally a B&B at first, where they discover more bodies, and they go to a different house, more bodies, go around, more bodies, and they're seemingly dead in horrific and gruesome ways, showing their bloody corpses with their skin peeled off and their arms and legs distorted with bones poking out. And it's a really horrific scenery. This is a story where you couldn't do on Doctor Who. because the graphics and the violence of it, the ideas of the violence, is something which is what's one of the strengths of the story. You can't take it out without changing the narrative, without changing the ideas of this adventure. And so this is actually one of the few occasions where I feel like Doctor Who couldn't make this adventure, that this is a story that does appeal to a mature audience. It's also great to know that for the first time in Torchwood, the tone is on beat. We don't get some really, we get some lighter moments, but majority of the time it's played with straight face, specifically when we're talking about the threat of the situation and how our team, for the majority, up to like maybe 2/3 in the adventure, don't actually know what they're dealing with. So what are they dealing with? Is it weevils? Is it some gruesome monsters? Is it beasts from the dawn of time? Is it the fairies again? Oh no. Yanto and Toshika get captured by whatever, and they're living in the basement. They find a bunch of dead bodies half eaten in a fridge, and this woman, seemingly scared out of her wits, has been asked to bring them upstairs to be ready for the harvest. And she seems to be just as scared of them, and seemingly is also a victim to the situation. So Yanto and Toshika go upstairs ready to be sacrificed, if you will, where it's revealed that the monster of the day is humans. Cannibals. Eating out other humans' flesh, seemingly for a harvest, which is stated as a tradition that they do once every 10 years. Cannibals. This makes this story a very unique. This is one of the things I was talking about in my pre-talking about the story part. This is actually one of the first narratives in Doctor Who in any sort of televised media where all the characters are human and there are no sci-fi elements that couldn't exist within the time period that this was made in 2006. This aired actually a year prior to 2007's season 3 of Doctor Who. So there's something. The twist that there ain't no aliens in this story, it's actually humans, actually is a very well handled twist. Because throughout the adventure, our team are constantly thinking about aliens, thinking about this could be some sort of effect of the rift. And so they're putting in this mind that they are these horrible creatures that are eaten, and they can kind of justify it. They can kind of justify, like, if animals are going around killing creatures because, you know, it's just feeding for them. But no, these are human beings. These are not just one, but an entire village full of people who have become cannibals. And so this is something that actually is part of the real world. Sadly, we do have cannibals in the real world, and that is what the story is dealing with. And the imagery we get here, the ideas that this story plays around with, just the brutality of it, the torture scene in which the leader is like basically teasing Toshika and Yanto and is basically like feeling up Toshika, is very intense, and it puts you at the edge of your seat. It's really, really, really suspenseful, and it makes you feel like you're watching a horror movie, a really good horror movie. Now, like, the story has some great directing and great scenery, but the actual plot itself, you could argue, is a very cliched plot. We have a scene in which Gwen, she gets shot, and it turns out then, oh no, it's just this innocent bystander who shot her by accident. We get some like more bubbling moments with Gwen and Owen throughout this, as Owen is trying to save her life, and she's kind of on drugs, so she's kind of like giddy, and she talks about him missing his job as a doctor, and he's like, oh, I couldn't stand the patients, and basically I'm a doctor, it's only my patients aren't living, because he does autopsies now and stuff, and whilst Jack is there to investigate, to try and figure out what's going on, and tracks down seemingly one of these creatures who have attacked them, Gwen and Owen go looking for the boy who has run out and who got kidnapped by the cannibals, only to find the police, and they're like, oh, thank God, we're safe, we're free. This is a part of a cliche in horror movies where it's like, oh look, we got somebody to save the day, someone help us. Oh no, wait, they're not actually. They are part of this organization, a part of this cultist group. But it's done in a very well handled manner. The resolution that the police officer is actually part of this cannibal family isn't actually pointed out at the very beginning of the story, at the very beginning of his scene. They wait the moment until we get a terrifying chase scene. Again, a bit cliched because we've seen it in 100 films. The Wolfman, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, where the girl injured is being chased by the man, and he's taunting her while she's scared out of her wits before being caught up, and somebody saves the day. It's stuff we've seen before, but it takes its time, it takes its breather, and allows its atmosphere, its directing, allows Andrew Goddard to do some fantastic work with the camera and fills these scenes with suspense, with atmosphere. And so the tortured team, or at least in this case, Owen and Gwen, they catch up to the cannibal. It's like, right, we can arrest him now. Come on, police officer, arrest him. Well, aren't you going to arrest him? To which the police officer is like, arrest my own uncle? Don't be absurd. That's the resolution where it turns out that he's part of the cult-like organisation of these cannibals as well. And the fact that we had a bit of time in believing that this police officer is an actual police officer makes you really appreciate the suspense and the atmosphere of the story. And when the twist is revealed that he's also part of these cannibal family, then you are generally in shock. Sure, it's something that we've seen in horror films before, but it's handled very well here. It's handled extremely gorgeous here. And so all of the tortured team, except for Jack, have been taken to the cannibals, ready to be eaten. Jack tracks down one of the cannibals, who starts off pretending to be just a normal bystander after Jack had shot him. Jack doesn't buy it and basically tortures him to tell him everything that's going on. And then we get the famous scene of the story in which the resolution of the story is a bloodbath where Jack comes in, bashes through the wall in a tractor he had found, and starts blazing the room with shotguns, injuring everybody in such precise ways of all the cannibal families, saving everybody of the tortured team before they could be eaten. Now, there's a lot of issues I have with this ending. For one, it seems like a very quick resolution. We're building up all this atmosphere, this tension. Is how are we going to get out of this? Oh, Jack's just going to burst in and kill everyone. Okay. And the action scene is way too quick, and you can tell that the directing was a bit too quick on the day, because the majority of these shots are in slow-mo, and it gives this climax a very goofy looking style, giving us one of the more weaker scenes in terms of visual style in the area. But this is a memorable scene for one occasion. It introduces us to the Captain Jack theme. Murray Gold came up with a leitmotif for Jack, which doesn't get introduced until this story in this scene. And the backstory behind this theme is bloody amazing. Essentially, Murray Gold got drunk one night, and when he was thinking about this scene, he thought, here he comes in a bloody grey tractor. And so Jack's theme, if you listen to carefully, sounds like someone saying, here he comes in a bloody grey tractor, here he comes in a bloody grey tractor, here he comes in a bloody grey tractor. So that's the origins of Captain Jack's theme. This would be his prominent theme throughout Series 1 to Children of Earth Miracle Day, and would be basically his leitmotif. But again, it's really strange that I believe it's like the 5th episode of the series. I've kind of lost count at this point. Oh, it's either the 6th. I think it's actually the 6th. And his theme gets introduced at the very last moments. We have a very intense moment then when Gwen asks Jack to spare the main cannibal's life, and she interrogates her, trying to figure out. She wants to understand. She doesn't want, to be part of it, but she wants to understand why these people have become cannibals. And he just whispers in her ear that it makes him happy. And that's the only resolution we're getting. There is no twist that it is aliens. There's no real resolution to this. All those people that they have murdered have just murdered because it was fun. That is messed up. And it's actually something, thematically, which ties into the season finale of Doctor Who, which is a bloody miracle. And it's here then where the story ends with Gwen's monologue saying it's like how the world's changed and this situation has really messed her up, and she can't talk to anybody, where it's revealed she has spent the night in Owen's flat, and Owen and her start their affair, which plays in throughout the series. So that is Countryside. Overall, for the majority of the story, it's a very good narrative. I will say though, for its reputation as one of the best Torchwood episodes, it does have its fault. Some of the directing is a bit weak on some parts. I feel like the ending, where Jack just comes in and shoots everybody, is really cool, really epic stuff, but does kind of feels like the story doesn't know how to end, so it just ends. So it's like the rest. It's like, okay, how are we going to get out of this? Are they going to team up? Are they going to plan? Are they going to set traps? What are they going to do? Oh no, Jack just comes in and blasts everyone. Like, that kind of feels anticlimactic. But for the majority of this narrative, for the majority of this story, it is phenomenally well. Specifically, Andy Goddard's directing shows that his first line into the Whoniverse was a very great start. There's some great cinematography with the countryside and the inside of the cannibal's house. The story moves at a slow, but intentionally slow, letting us feel the atmosphere, and gives us the tension that we need in a narrative like this, and that twist, and some of the gruesome things that we bear witness in the story gives this story a really unnerving feeling that makes you feel like you shouldn't be watching this. This is something that you've stumbled on. This is like watching. This is basically the Doctor Who's equivalent of what's that film of the cannibals? I mean, the story is talking about, what's it called? Cannibal Holocaust. You know, that really messed up film that everybody talks about. It feels like the Doctor Who equivalent of that. Obviously not as gruesome and not as bad, but the Doctor Who Torchwood equivalent of it. This universe's equivalent of it. And it does succeed in that, and it does help bringing up the atmosphere. However, I do feel if we get another story like this later down the line, if Torchwood somehow ever comes back and we do tackle ideas like this again, where we tackle a horror-themed cannibals and stuff like that, then I feel like this story would instantly get some downgrades and one feel as special or as unique as it does. But still a really great story, highly recommended, and just go and watch it and feel for yourself. A lot of people cite this as their favourite Chris Chibnall story. Some of them even state that it's their only the only Chris Chibnall narrative that they like. So there's that. If you're one of those people who don't like Chris Chibnall, maybe try Countryside out. And that's all I got to really say about this story. So join me next time when the Doctor and Martha discover Cybermen. Wait, what? Doctor Who didn't tackle Cybermen during Series 3? Oh, they did, but not on TV, in novel form. So I'll see you next time for Made in Steel. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!